What is up, fight fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Scrap Report. I am, of course, the Shogun of Ringside Intel, Jason Burgos, and with me, as always, is the man so hateful. He recently got a gym challenge from a UFC fighter, and that is the Herald of Hate himself, Anthony Walker. How are you doing today, Mr. ABW?
I'm okay, other than the fact that I've spent the entirety of my day quivering in fear. Other than that, I'm just fine. So, frequent underwear changes as fear does bring the body to do certain things that we can't control. But other than that, yeah, good to go, man.
We've got a lot to talk about in this new edition. We haven't done one in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk some post UFC 302 thoughts about that pay-per-view. We're going to talk a little bit about the stuff going on with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. Hopefully that fight is still planned at some point this summer, but it's not happening on July 20th now. We're going to talk about if that happens or not. I'll talk about fights that may happen. McGregor channel, we still aren't completely sure that's going to happen in a couple of weeks at UFC 303. Deontay Wilder, we're going to talk about tough loss. Where does he go? Does he continue fighting? We're also going to talk a little bit about some interesting news in terms of BKFC. We've had David Feldman on Ringside Intel and interviews and stuff like that recently. They have a little bit of a new relationship with Rizin, the Japanese MMA promotion. We're going to talk about all those things. But first, we're going to go UFC 302 talk. We got a lot of conversation about that. The first one of the various UFC 302 talk is Islam Makhachev. He has another title defense, probably maybe the toughest fight he's had so far in the UFC, even though he actually has one loss. But really hard fought fight. He won, at least for me, I thought he won every round. There were some rounds that were close, but still highly competitive against Dustin Poirier. Did his performance, because he got bloodied up a little bit. Poirier was able to stifle his takedowns, which was very impressive. Good job by Dustin in that fight. Did his performance at all maybe change your opinion on him? Because at least for Ringside Intel, also on Sportsnet, he's our number one ranked pound for pound fighter. Did it maybe his performance make him seem more beatable, as like Arman Sarukian has been saying from that fight? Maybe it makes you feel he is more well-rounded. He met some resistance and he got through it, showed championship heart, and did what he had to do. Or did it even take him out of the top spot for, if you are listening or watching, for pound rankings number one? What do you feel? What is your post-fight thoughts on Islam Makhachev's performance 302?
I think his performance was masterful, and it did not do anything to make me doubt anything about his status. It confirmed he is exactly who we thought he was. I think he's at a level of dominance where if you do mildly well against him, everyone thinks you had a fantastic performance. Dustin Poirier put his entire heart, soul, and being into that, and he deserves all the credit in the world for everything that he laid out on the line in the cage that night. But it wasn't close. It was not a close fight. Like, Poirier had moments of success. He had a few things that worked well for him in spots, but he got out-grappled. He got outstruck. He got dominated position-wise. There were so few moments that Poirier was in control of that fight. The only reason why you might think otherwise is because we just really, really like Dustin Poirier, and that's totally understandable. Like, be a fanboy for Poirier. He seems like a great dude, but that is not a performance that wins a fight, unfortunately, against someone that tough. I don't really see how this is up for debate, like how people are doubting what Islam brings to the table after what he did to one of the greatest lightweights of all time, after doing it to I understand the knock on the Volkanovski fights because Volkanovski was coming up in weight, but still you're talking about one of the greatest featherweights of all time. And previous to that, he beat another one of the greatest lightweights of all time in Charles Oliveira and totally dominated that fight.
Yep.
I mean, what are we talking about here? And especially if this debate is centered around whether or not John Jones belongs in the number one pound for pound spot. To be the number one pound for pound fighter, you got to fight. It's that simple.
Yep.
It's really that simple. He has not been active at all, beside from the Gone fight in the last like 4 years. I'm sorry, man. I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. He's a great fighter. He's the greatest of all time, but that is a different conversation than pound for pound at the moment.
And he's considered by most the greatest fighter. You can be the greatest fighter. You can't be the best in the world today when you're fighting once in like 4 years. Sorry, that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
But I agree with that 1,000%. You nailed it with like just Islam has been so good. Resistance means, oh, look at him. He's fighting at the highest levels. He's fighting the best fighters at a division many have felt is the best division in MMA throughout its history. Like he's fighting top guys all the time. Sooner or later, you're going to have a tough night. And the fact is, where would Khabib have been in this position if his takedowns were stuff like this? That man would have got knocked out. I love Khabib.
Oh,
Khabib's a legendary fighter. If you want to make the case he's the best lightweight ever, he doesn't have the striking Islam does. Islam's a very sound. He's not fancy. He's not doing wild stuff. He's just super sound. He's got combinations. He's a good striker. He went there with a Danish striker, and without a doubt, what makes him so good, and we saw that in the very first takedown, he was able to land some shots on Poirier. Poirier had to respect the striking for a second, and he got taken down. Again, his wrestling's always going to be a strength, but when you have that for fighters to opponents to worry about, and then you can strike. I mean, he's as complete as a fighter as you can get. Yeah. Didn't change the narrative. Yeah, what you can say?
Oh yeah, just because I'm glad that you pointed that out about the difference between him and Khabib. Like Khabib certainly belongs in that conversation of greatest lightweight of all time, and I'm not, I'm not going to sit here and debate about that, because whether you agree or disagree, you at least got to see the merit in that argument. But when we're talking about the level of well-roundedness that Makhachev has, it's just different. Khabib developed into a formidable striker towards the end of his career, but it was kind of playing into his grappling strengths. Islam is a good striker in isolation. He wasn't
technical.
Yeah, he wasn't technical. He just was able to play off of it. It complemented his style very well, and that's a smart move. As far as like just trying to plan his strategy and whatnot, to just build off of what he already can do. But Islam is a good striker in isolation, in moments where grappling is not a factor necessarily. When you have like this straight up stand up battle, he's out striking guys then. So this is just different. This is very, very, very different. Makhachev is like the 2.0 version of Khabib, and maybe we'll see someone crack that armor at some point. Sarukian certainly has a chance to do that, but as of right now, Makhachev is pound for pound number one, and I just don't see that being taken away from him.
Yeah, and if Sarukian goes and gets the fight and he beats him, that doesn't mean like Islam isn't as good as we thought. Just Sarukian is very good. Exactly. He had a close fight before. Point. He dominated Charles Oliveira, who we both respect as one of the great lightweights of this generation all time. And, he beats Islam. He's just really, really good too, and that's exciting for the division. But moving on from there, let's talk about Dustin Poirier now. We all knew, and it was kind of part of the advertising going into this fight. This is probably his last chance at a title. Like he's probably not going to go to welterweight and get a title. He's used all up his lives to get lightweight titles at lightweight. So where does he go from here? Is this the end for him? I mean, he leaves that fight, busted up nose, broken rib, torn ACL. So now he's going to go have to repair that ACL, which is going to take some time. He's already, on the back end of his career. He's going to lose like at least 6 months in recovery for that kind of thing. Does he retire, or is there interesting fights? And then the fights I'm going to throw out there, the ones I think could be good enough, it's for money fight's sake to bring him back. It's Nate Diaz. They almost fought before. Nate clearly wants to be back in the UFC if they give him the right money. That'd be a fun fight. That can easily be a pay-per-view kind of main event, co-main event. Volkanovski has been pushing for the idea of a fight with Poirier. Not as glamorous as a Nate fight, but that's a fun, interesting fight. That's kind of like a fun super fight thing we don't get enough of. It doesn't have to be champions fighting in two divisions, just two great fighters from two different divisions fighting. It's a fun fight. We can always go the third Gaethje fight. I mean, they had two great fights already. The only problem is these guys seem to really like each other. they seem to be friends. So I don't know if they want to do that to each other. Or is there another option? Like, where do you feel? Does he retire, or do any of these options, are they strong enough to pull him back in?
I mean, the Nate Diaz fight is one that you would have to entertain just because of the money that can bring. Yeah. That would certainly rile the fan base up and get people interested. People would throw their credit cards at that, no matter how completely non-competitive that fight would likely be. Interestingly enough, as much as I don't want to see the Gaethje fight, I don't want to see a trilogy between them. That would still be a great fight. And since they both didn't exactly fare too well their last times out, they probably will be on the same sort of path to recovery, to where the timeline could match up and it would make sense. But man, the Volkanovski fight, get that all the way out of here. I don't want to see that. That just no, thank you. But the one that you didn't list here, I'm surprised you didn't list this one. And this one had a little heat for a second. Colby Covington. I think Dustin Poirier going up to 170 to fight Colby Covington makes a ton of sense right now. These are two guys who already don't like each other, have a history. Colby is struggling for some relevancy, struggling to keep his name in the headlines. We see that he looked like he played Duck, Duck, Goose with Ian Gary. Now that Ian Gary is fighting MVP. After all that talk, he had all the smoke for Gary, and that fight isn't happening. I think he would gladly take the smoke from someone who's a smaller person that he thinks is a better style matchup for him. That being said, I think Colby gets done away with pretty brutally in that. I don't think the Colby Covington that we see now is nearly the same guy who was able to take Usman to the brink. So, but yeah, Colby Covington, that's the fight. I think you've got the interest there. You've got the marketability. Why not? And it also keeps big names going on and active without damaging any title pictures as well.
Now, moving on from there, I mean, oh God, that card in general just wasn't that great. It was kind of boring for the most part. But the co-main event was one of the best examples of kind of the card in one lumps. One perfect example was that Sean Strickland versus Paul Costa, a very ho-hum fight. Sean Strickland, even though it was a split decision, he clearly won the fight. Paul Costa was just doing a lot of running and all this stuff. So first, before we get to Sean Strickland, because we have much to say about him, should we just stop caring and talking about Paulo Costa as a top 10 middleweight? I mean, I think he's done enough to kill any kind of there was times where he was looked at as the second coming of Vitor Belfort. Just big, muscular, athletic Brazilian guy that can knock people the F out. He was doing that for a time. And then Izzy just ruined this man. He just dismantled him and embarrassed him. And he's just never been the same. He's worried about his stupid comedy juice nonsense and getting injured. Is this guy just not, let alone a contender, because he's trying to contend more, is this guy not even a top 10 middleweight anymore?
He's certainly not a top 10 middleweight. And quite honestly, I don't think he's ever been a top shelf middleweight. I've never thought that. And I hate to say that because I think as a person, just as a personality, Paulo Costa is fascinating, right? He's hilarious. He understands the unserious nature of this goofy sport that we have attached ourselves to. And he plays into that and has a good time with it. To be on the ground for, what was that last UFC I went to? 298, I think it was, where he and Whitaker put on that great fight. And as the buildup was going on, all the press conferences and stuff, man, he was playing to the crowd and it was hilarious. He was having a great time. And it's great to see fighters take it for what it is and enjoy the moment. So I wish he were more successful. And then when he fights at his best, it is exciting to watch, but he's just never been that good. And that's sort of, I think when things went wrong was well before Adesanya. I think we're talking about things going wrong when he fought Johnny Hendricks, because that was too big of a name to then just kind of fade away into obscurity and just fight no names. Even though Hendricks was well past his prime and for all intents and purposes done, I think he retired actually after that fight. It was the perfect showcase. But then after that, I think he fought Uriah Hall, if I'm not mistaken. Uriah Hall fought the worst game plan in the world in that, and just essentially gift wrapped that fight over to Costa in the second round. And then after that was, I believe, Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero was the perfect pairing because they're sort of similar nature in the way they fight. The only problem is by beating Yoel Romero, there was nowhere else to go but a title shot. Like Romero was too good and too highly ranked and too proven as a top level fighter in order for Costa to get that win and then go backwards. So when Izzy works him over, I was not surprised at all. And Costa has since been getting worked over. And when he didn't get worked over, he did put some size on Whitaker. Whitaker was able to get the win on that, and by proving that he is the better fighter. But then Luke Rockhold, who hasn't been a relevant MMA fighter since like 2018 or something like that.
Yeah.
Paulo Costa, unfortunately, has just never been that good. Like, he showed against Strickland that, going back to what I said about Islam earlier, he is who we thought he was. It's just that we don't think that highly of what he has to offer in the cage.
And to add to that, following the Yoel Romero fight, which was in August of 2019, he's 1-4 in his last 5, and the only win is that fight you mentioned, Luke Rockhold, which at that time in 2022, that was one of Rockhold's last fight,
and that was a horrible fight.
Yeah, horrible and competitive. Like, he didn't dominate him. Like, he isn't far off from being 0-5 in his last 5, and this is one of the points I wanted to bring up, and it frustrated me while watching the broadcast. And as a New Yorker, one of the things I like about New York sports and the broadcasters are on, especially the Mets, as a Mets fan, they call it like it is. And they will, say it. If somebody is not playing well, they'll call them out. That happens a lot in New York sports and East Coast, Northeast sports a lot. But the UFC broadcasters are just so favorable. Now, we know sometimes they're even just super favorable to certain fighters, but these fighters can do no wrong. It blew my mind when you got Joe Rogan, you got DC, they're guys that are people think, oh, they say it like it is, and they're honest, but they're talking about this guy, Paul Costa. His camp telling them that he just trains when he wants. He could call them late at night, like, oh, I want to train now, and he'll go in there, he'll kill it, and he'll work it out. No wonder he's losing. How are they not saying, like, that's a terrible thing? How are you a high-level fighter and you just train when you feel like it? We got all these great fighters out there doing it 6 days a week or maybe 7 days a week in camps, killing themselves, going 10 rounds, training against the best of the best. Who's his training partners that are showing up at 3 a.m? We know they ain't elite. They're just, this is why, like, how are they not pulling him out on the rug? Like, this is Paul Costa is super talented. He has all the skills to be a champion. These are the kind of odd things that is maybe why he's lost his fight. They were just acting like, oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah. He goes and trains hard at 3 a.m. Who cares?
I mean, that was one of the most ridiculous talking points in a fight filled with ridiculous talking points. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because the commentary on that one was absolutely trying to convince us in any way, shape, or form that this was a close fight, or that one guy, at some point I thought they said Costa was breaking Strickland or something like that. I was just like, what is going on? And then for what the judge, was it Torelli, to have probably the worst scorecard in MMA history with that 49-46 for Costa. That overall fight, the fight sucked, the commentary sucked. Thank God Anik was there to deliver his normal level of grace and saving the day that he always does. And I love DC. Like, I'm kind of a DC fanboy. My man was rough on that broadcast. Rogan was rough on that broadcast as well. And those two together are just a horrible pair at this point. I would like to. I think you can take that 15 or 25 minutes, and why that fight was 25 minutes. Another story too. I think you can take that 25 minutes worth of fighting, and that can represent perhaps the worst overall exhibition of high-level MMA on all levels.
Wow.
The matchmaking, as far as making this a 25-minute fight, just indefensible, considering the style matchup. The action itself, ass. The commentary, garbage. The officiating, equally trash. That was overall a horrible display of what mixed martial arts has to offer at the highest levels. That wouldn't even cut it on a regional level.
And we talked about it after the main event. Man, like, I wish they would have took those last 2 rounds of that fight and put it on the Islam Poirier fight. And man, we would have had an amazing round 6-7 in that fight.
Oh my God.
Moving on from that, just to continue just of that fight. Sean Strickland. Just never been a fan. If you watch the podcast, just not a fan of Sean Strickland and his unique
I wonder why.
approach, his unique approach to fight hyping and opinions. In a lot of ways, he's become the new Colby Covington, and just these weird, outlandish comments. Just American masculinity at its 1940s best. But the other thing is he's more like Colby Covington, because when does he take a bit of a hit as just kind of a boring fighter? And I get it. I'm not a fighter. I'm just a chubby nobody who's just talking about MMA, but I'm still a fan. And this guy is not enjoyable to watch more times than not. Not to say that he's not talented. You can't beat Israel Adesanya without being talented, but for the amount of promotion and opportunities he gets, I feel the way they've handled a Kamaru Usman, a Tyron Woodley, and so many fighters who are more entertaining than him and acted like they were the worst fighters and just made everybody turn off the channel. I don't understand why Sean Strickland doesn't get any heat. Why is he getting main event, co-main event opportunities? Like, what? Let me look it up. When was the last time this guy got a finish? I'm curious. Let's see here. He lost. Let's see. Decision. He beat Abus Magomedov. Abus Magomedov getting him in a fight was a joke. This is not even a fighter. He was getting like a top 5 guy when Abus Magomedov is probably not even a top 20 fighter. And then he lost. Like, outside of Abus Magomedov, you got to go back to 2020 when
he was at welterweight.
Brendan Allen. No,
he's at middleweight. He was at middle. Okay, that was his only middleweight finish before Magomedov, right? Yeah.
He's had, he was an entertaining, fun fighter. He's just not that guy anymore. And like this, they heaping a praise on his style. Like, is he not kind of just Colby Covington of stand up? And he's just kind of like an unentertaining fighter that kind of just talks his way into big fights. Yeah. And he's not even as charismatic as Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, like definitely not. To be fair, nobody is really as charismatic as Chael Sonnen. So let's make sure he has that crown firmly on his head. But Colby Covington and Sean Strickland are like one and the same. Like you said, he's a stand-up version of Colby. And just like Colby, the wheels start falling off when he starts losing. When his style is dealt with more appropriately, or physically he just can't do it anymore. That's when everyone is going to realize, oh, this guy, he's never been fun. Like, he's not a fun guy to watch. It's like, this isn't cool. And I think as his personality is just like Kobe, is what keeps people interested right now. And I mean, that is what it is. I'm sure his personality will attract some of the same sorts of people around. Cool, but I'm done with it. I'm really done with it. And when he starts losing, it's going to fall off a cliff. He's going to quickly become very unpopular and very unmarketable at that point.
Wherever you are listening to this, watching us, please like, share, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you thought of 302. Were you disappointed by Poirier's loss? But there was there was some victories in this feed. What do you think of Islam's place is the best fight in the world? Moving on from there, let's talk about Tyson and Paul now. I mean, it was big news. If you missed it somehow, the fight has been postponed. It's not going to happen July 20th because Grandpa Tyson, he had a bit of a health scare on a flight. Where was he flying from? LA to Miami?
Miami to LA, I believe.
There's a call on the flight for medical attention once they land. He's having some issues related to an ulcer, a long-time ulcer, but he claimed after the whole thing he was fine. His camp claimed he was fine, and then MBB Promotions released last week he's not clearly fine, and doctors have advised him to chill out a little bit. But it seems like he can get back to fighting and training fairly soon. So they made it seem like there was supposed to be an announcement this week, I think tomorrow when we're recording this, of a new date. Maybe it'll be August, so maybe it won't be much of a wait, although that's a big venue, and I'm sure it's not easy to get dates for that venue, so maybe it's a venue change, unfortunately. But there's been a lot of talk about maybe a new opponent. A lot of people calling to jump into it. I covered it on a Ringside. Roy Jones is interested in maybe replacing Mike Tyson. So I got an email from bookies.com. They have a odds on who is likely to replace Mike Tyson in his fight against Jake Paul. Right now, the best odds are Tommy Fury, followed by KSI, Logan Paul, who Logan Paul has suggested many times he fight his brother, which shows how unique their brother relationship is. Amir Khan, that's an interesting name to throw out there. That's
a surprising one. Yeah.
Roy Jones Jr., as we know, Canelo Alvarez, not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Conor McGregor, not going to happen either. And then the field is a plus 1,000 odds. Of those, do you think any of them? Everybody else.
Oh, everybody. I was like, is that some new streamer or something? Like, it's like, who the hell is that?
Yes, no, it's not a YouTube influencer. It is
okay. I'm old, man. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get you. Every time a person that accompanies Logan Paul on Raw, I'm Raw, WWE Raw, I'm like, who the hell is this person? I don't know any of them. So what do you think? Are any of those options realistic? Do you see if there is a cancellation, one makes more sense than the other, or do you think there's somebody else that might be a better fit?
Well, the issue we're having is that this is taking place in Cowboy Stadium. And those are a lot of seats to fill. No matter what configuration they have, it's a lot of seats to fill, and I'm sure it's not cheap holding that venue for this event. So a name like Tommy Fury, as more interesting of a fight as that probably would be, probably doesn't make sense. I don't think it attracts Cowboy Stadium level crowd.
Well, what if, how about throw out this to make it easier? What if they change venue? They go to like the Mavericks Arena, something like that. Then.
Yeah, if they change venue, then yeah, Tommy Fury or KSI make the most sense as far as who's available and career trajectories and all that sort of stuff. Especially KSI. I mean, maybe the KSI one, maybe they want to save that for Paul returning to just the straight influencers, because I know that's a fight that they've been trying to build up for a couple years. Tommy Fury rematch makes a lot of sense in that spot. Amir Khan would do the trick as well. That's just a surprising name. I just did not think he was involved in any of this whatsoever. So I don't know where that name came from. If he been on the record talking about he wanted to do something like this, I have no idea where the odds makers came up with that one. Canelo is absolutely not going to happen. It would fill a stadium, but it's not going to happen. Roy Jones, though, that's the name. That's the name that makes most sense, because it preserves this pseudo quest for legitimacy that Jake Paul's on. So he can say, hey, I defeated a world champion. Okay. So he's in the same age bracket that he was targeting originally. And Roy Jones is a name that was very big back in the day, and like diehard boxing fans would cringe as they handed over their credit cards. So okay, I guess we can do that. Yikes.
I think Roy Jones probably is the fight that makes the most sense, just for what you said, and I think it's the biggest thing. Amir Khan fascinates me, but I think most people kind of forgot about him. Like his relevancy was like a decade ago, unfortunately. He's disappeared for the most part since then. Roy Jones fits the bill in a lot of ways in keeping the theme of this and everything. But honestly, I really hope it will be Logan. Logan versus Jake. People on Netflix, oh my God, they would watch two brothers try to beat the hell out of each other, and then they would both sell it. We'd get all the dirty laundry about how Logan was just the worst big brother and all this nonsense when they were coming up as YouTubers. That would be great. It would be. I would watch it. I would watch that even maybe more than him and Tyson.
I mean, we would watch it. The only thing is, it would most likely be a massive disappointment. Massive disappointment. Like they can talk all the mess they want to each other. I mean, they I'm sure they have issues with one another. Like, of course they probably do. And I remember they had some conflict about the Prime Hydration sponsorship on one of their fights or something like that. Whatever. Like that's a possibility. But at the end of the day, they are brothers. When they get in there with those gloves on and they look at each other, they're, oh, that's my big brother. Oh, that's my little brother. They're not going to actually try to beat the crap out of each other. It's going to turn into a glorified sparring session, and probably a very weak one at that. I think that's better served as something involved with WWE. like that makes more sense for WWE to bring them on board. And you can, granted, I'm far removed from my days of following pro wrestling and knowing all the storylines and all that stuff, but you can start them off as rivals and then turn them into a tag team or something. And I don't know, they have a match with two other, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
That's how you're so removed. You're backwards. You got to be a tag team and then have that breakup and then you fight. Just like the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, the Rockers. You got to go break up after the team.
Oh, okay. All right. If you say so.
Moving on to another fight that we don't know if it's going to happen or not. And you covered it for Ringside. You did a great video on it. And it's this Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler saga. Man, they really, I can see a book being written about this, Joy. Like, it's crazy from start to where it'll finish, because we don't know if this fight is still gonna happen after this big. They're gonna have a press conference in Dublin, Ireland. They were gonna get 10,000 people for a presser, and Conor still couldn't deliver for his boys in Dublin. So there's all these rumors. You covered it. I mean, I want you to take it on this one, just for the people that maybe aren't following it and stuff like that. What's the general story of why this fight is up in the air, but it could still happen at UFC 303?
Well, I mean, we don't have a lot of like hard evidence one way or another. As of right now, it looks like Ariel Helwani is the only one that has like any sort of knowledge of what's going on, and I don't know who he's talking to in either camp. I have no idea what's going on in that regard, but I like to think that this is McGregor holding out for more money. That's my feeling.
Oh yeah,
because the UFC is very quick. Like, you think about after every fight, Dana White is very quick to hop on that mic and talk about, the gate did this. We sold this many tickets and this amount of revenue coming in.
And he already said the gate for this is already on record, which was a dumb decision by him. Now in hindsight, makes you say that.
Well, you think McGregor did not sit back, hear that, take a sip of his proper 12, maybe with some snow on the table, and just come up and say, what? How much am I getting paid for this?
Yeah.
I think that's probably what's going on, that he's holding out for more money. So the change in sentiment from Helwani's reports of initially, I think like Sunday or Monday, it was like, this is looking real bad. And then I think the day after that, he said something about the UFC was actively looking for replacements for either Conor, so Chandler could still fight, or just an entirely new main event. And McGregor probably gave them a number. They said, hell no, we're going to find something else. And then when they looked at all the other options, like, I don't think we have a choice. They come back to McGregor like, all right, let's meet halfway, and some sort of positive conversation start happening. If I had to, if you put a gun in my head and made me guess out of raw speculation, this is what I'm coming up with. I think that's what it is. He's holding out for money. What they do on this card without McGregor, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I know people are hoping to see like Holloway and Chandler for the BMF. I mean, that's serviceable, right? That's a good idea. That's sort of lemons to lemonade scenario. But the UFC has already invested so much money into pushing this fight. There's so much money on the table for Chandler. I mean, good Lord, Chandler has been on the sidelines as this division has been wide open for him to reemerge into the title picture. He's been sitting down waiting for this red panty night. And that color red ain't so bright right now. When your man was out there quoting MLK on social media, his fellow civil rights icon, when he was out there quoting him, it was like, yo, this is doomed. This is doomed. Like, Chandler, this for Chandler, it's got to be Conor robust for this event. Like, you if you sit on the sidelines for this event because Conor's no, I get it. Just come back in the fall and just quietly just take another fight. But you got to be all in on McGregor at this point, man, because this is nuts.
Yeah, I can definitely see Chandler doing the Holloway if they give him the money. Like they like, look, we need you to save this. And then he's like, I've waited a long time. I've lost a lot of money. Okay, if you're going to give me $1 million to take this extra, I'll do it. But and just to add to this, how bad a position UFC has put themselves in, because they risk in terms of, they just feel, and understandably so, and they're right, throw Conor on a card, especially after being away for several years. That's more enough, because boy, behind him on this card is, that's the thing. There's nothing on this card that you can really move up and be a pay-per-view main event. You got like Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg, which is a good, an interesting fight. Ulberg, yeah, but like
we pay-per-view on that.
Yeah, like the people that are going to watch this are like, who's Carlos Ulberg? You know, like you got Machado versus Page, which is a fun fight. That ain't no main event. It's not even a co-main event. You got Cub Swanson, who is well past his best age. You got like Michelle Waterson Gomez versus Jillian Robertson. That was a cool fight like 2 years ago. You got Andre Arlovsky. You know, like this is not a good card. So they really put themselves or really Conor's putting UFC's back against the wall and like, you know, just
as
trying to. Yeah. So it's a wild situation. But again, wherever you're watching, listening, please like, share, subscribe, comment. What do you think is going on with Conor and this weird situation?
I'm glad that you mentioned like how this card is not that good, right? It's you know, first of all, MVP and Gary should be the co-main for this. Like they should be. That is the most intriguing fight outside of Conor and Chandler by far. But I mean, you really didn't learn your lesson after UFC 151. The card that never was. They never learned their lesson from that.
Yeah.
You put your hopes of this huge event on the back of someone who hasn't fought in several years and will hold out for money, will hold the promotion hostage, you know, decided he was not going to do press for UFC 200 and they had to pull him from that. This is the man that you have put the entire cards back on. I just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. It's like, learn your lessons. Jesus Christ.
Moving on from there, Deontay Wilder suffers a 5th round knockout to Zhang this past weekend. I mean, he was given hints that this may be it. It just seems like it is. Like after, like, he was on top of the world, one of the very best heavyweights in the world. It was debatable if it was him or Tyson Fury, and we had the good pleasure of getting a fight between him and Tyson Fury to help decide that. And he's never really been the same since that first fight. I think he's lost like 3 of his last 5, and he's got like 1 draw and 1 win. Like 2 Tyson Fury's lost. He lost somebody else.
He beat Robert Helenius. He beat Robert Helenius. He lost to Parker and now Zhang.
Parker, yeah. So I mean, like, I think he's probably gonna call it a career now, and it might be the best idea for him. So let's say he does call it a career. What is your lasting thoughts on Deontay Wilder and his kind of place in boxing heavyweight history?
Man, his overall place in history is going to be hard to. That's really hard to quantify this close to what he's done, and we don't even know for sure that he's done with. I believe he should be done. I think at least they were smart enough to make sure that he did not fight in August, because he was supposed to fight Jared Anderson out here in LA. And now Anderson is fighting Martin Bakole, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. So he's fighting Martin Bakole, another sort of fringe top 10 guy. And that fight makes a lot of sense. Both guys, we can talk about that at another time. But anyway, Deontay Wilder, as far as pure excitement goes, I don't think there are many names that match with him. Yeah. Just purely, you turn on the TV and you are fascinated by what you see. Yeah. He certainly was not the most technical boxer ever. Like that's clear as day. We've talked about that numerous times over our years of podcasting together, that Deontay Wilder was never this technical dynamo. He was never someone who you knew for sure was going to just put on this virtuoso performance as far as the X's and O's. But man, it was always exciting to watch. For as wild and unrestrained and sort of novice even his approach was a lot of times, it sure was entertaining. It was very, very, very entertaining. So at the least, he deserves that. And I think for American heavyweight boxing, he definitely deserves a huge, huge amount of respect, because previous to him, what was like the heavyweight, the American heavyweights
Yeah.
that we think of, what, like you're talking of Tyson, after Tyson, like Holyfield and Riddick Bowe and I said Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, like you're talking about that generation, and that's a long
John
time ago.
Ruiz, like, oh god.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
You know who's probably the best heavyweight in between them? Roy Jones Jr.
I was just about to say that. Like his lone heavyweight fight.
Yeah.
So he brought back like dedicated American heavyweights being at the forefront of boxing, and that's a big deal, because the U.S. has always had, dominant heavyweights. The Joe Lewises, the Muhammad Alis, the Sonny Listons, and just the numerous names throughout history, and Foreman, just these great fighters at heavyweight that were from the United States, and Wilder was able to sort of bring some of that energy back.
Yeah, I don't think he's a top 10 heavyweight. He's probably not top 15. But that said, I think he has a better designation in the history, and I think that's as the hardest puncher in heavyweight history, which is saying something. These are the hardest hitting men on the planet, and I don't, as legit as Mike Tyson is as a puncher, he's probably right there. I give it to Deontay because what you were saying, he could knock you out with awful technique. Like, Mike Tyson had fantastic technique in his hooks and his footwork. Like, Deontay Wilder had none of that. Like, he was the hardest puncher ever with none of that. But that also is kind of the big what if about him. Could he have been a top 5, maybe the greatest heavyweight ever, if he was just in a better camp, was more technically sound, better defense? That's the thing. He could be hit. That was the problem with, like, he should have beaten Tyson Fury, but Tyson, he could be hit. His footwork was never great. He got himself out of position often, stuff like that. Just how good he could have been is always the frustrating thing to watch for me, because he was such a good athlete, got into the sport so late. But I think being known as the hardest puncher in the history of boxing is better than being the 9th or 8th best heavyweight ever.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I was compiling, and I've got more of these lists to do for Ringside Intel, but compiling like the greatest fighters of all time, and a lot of those names, as great as they are, does the average fan know anything about them?
Yeah.
Does their legacy live beyond that of fight nerds like us? Yeah. And Deontay Wilder has like this scary sort of power, which does translate to everyone in the world knowing, oh, this guy could decapitate you with a very poorly thrown jab.
Yeah. Yes.
To see him able to do things to people where his feet are coming up at the wrong times, and he's not even throwing with his hip, and it's just it just looked like so awkward and so off kilter, and it was still effective, is nuts. So if he actually was trained as like a scientific boxer, the sky's the limit. Like, with his pure athletic talent, what could have been done had he either, one, been more coachable, or two, were with a more qualified set of coaches, or more, maybe not qualified is the proper word, more suited to him as far as like personality, chemistry, and things are concerned. We're talking about an all-time legend that probably would have smashed through record books. I think he even did. I think he does hold some record for like title defenses within the last however many years. Like, I think he defended the WBC belt 10 or 11 times or something like that. Yeah. So one of the modern record holders. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. Moving on to our last point, we'll quickly talk about it, and that is the news just came up this week. BKFC is working with Risen to help promote BKFC events in Japan, bare knuckle events in Japan, parts of Asia, stuff like that. And it's an interesting, and it's great for them. They've really. They have to deserve a lot of credit for kind of just rebuilding a sport, a century-old sport, into something new, something cool, something interesting from the ground up. They have been on the wrong side of illegal streaming, and they probably haven't made the money they got. But a lot of former UFC fighters that have gone there, gotten paid well, and Mike Perry's become a name in the combat sports again because he's become a star there. But and I think it begs the question, especially since we've seen so many MMA promotions kind of just come and go and just always lose to the UFC. PFL, as much as I'd like the Bellator signing, or purchase, they haven't really taken that step to look like a real competitor, which makes me ask the question: is kind of maybe not a competitor, but is BKFC sort of like the next best fight promotion in this sort of alternatives section of the fight game and combat sports outside of boxing? Is it not PFL and it's not one? The next best thing in stuff outside UFC, is it BKFC now?
I wish I was saying that it was PFL after the Bellator purchase, but we're getting wind of some things that don't seem like they're right over there right now. Hopefully that changes, but I mean, we live in a world where BKFC is the number 2 alternative for fights. It's the number 2 route for fights outside of just the sport of boxing. Yeah, this is it. This is where the guys seem to be getting paid. This is the company that is making a lot of big moves from a business standpoint and is increasing its presence among the general consciousness of fans. The BKFC is doing it right now where others are not. Like, one essentially has become like a kickboxing organization, which is cool, but it's not MMA. And like they're barely putting on MMA fights right now, and they're still pretending to be bigger than what they are. PFL is having its issues right now, and maybe because the ink is still drying on the Bellator acquisition, they have to get some things aligned before they're up and running on all cylinders. But we're hearing too many things coming out of them. We're not hearing those things from BKFC. We're hearing about BKFC making moves. We're hearing fighters at BKFC sing the promotion's praises about the money they're making, about the opportunities they have and how they're being treated, which is a far cry from the BKFC that originally took place. Like the first iterations of BKFC were not the same. Like some of the stuff that I was hearing from backstage at some of those fights was like, oh, this is awful. Maybe some of that is going on now. I don't know, but from the public standpoint, they are on a roll right now, and they are a promotion to watch.
And also going again to give them credit, I mean, this is a sport that was outlawed, like in a lot of states. Like they had to build an infrastructure just to go travel around and go do events. And I'm sure eventually New York they'll get clearance, and BKFC in New York be a good thing. But also, I think it's a great sign of interest level is that one, they seem to be getting a solid young audience, and the younger people. It's not just an older person. Like boxing has a lot of older people, unfortunately. They have that kind of good mix of fans, but also people want to be a part of it. Triller is kind of looking like whatever, it's a failed thing, but Triller still said, okay, we want to put a piece of this, and they purchased it. They didn't go to Bellator and BK and then PFL and trying to get that. They went to BKFC and bought it. Conor McGregor, he sees the value in it as a businessman. He also invested in it, and he's a part of that now. And when his UFC career ends, that's going to be the potential of having a Conor McGregor to either fight for you or promote your event, which is still gonna. His name is set in gold that he's just one of those big combat sports stars that's still going to be a big deal when he's not fighting anymore. So that's the fascinating thing about it. And now them expanding the brand, because they've been doing events like in Bulgaria and a lot of interesting places just to expand the brand, but to have that going to Asia and the tie to Risen, and maybe you get some Risen. And also just, we talk about options for fans. It's an option for fighters. Like UFC fighters can go there and make better money and for a less rigorous on the body training sport instead of going to PFL and belt, stuff like that. So,
and also Japan is a haven for sort of the freak show fights, for like the oddities and like this, that still has this marriage with pro wrestling, and MMA. So why not throw BKFC in the mix? Why not have a bare knuckle event take place as part of a Rise of New Year's Eve card? Like, why not? It's just going to be fun. It's going to be more fun. So I'm here for it.
And if you can expand your roster too, I mean, maybe there's not a lot of Japanese fighters that have, evolved and become state elite fighters that but there's no doubt, if you're a person that watched Pride back in the day, these Japanese fighters is tough as nails. So that BKFC is probably the perfect route for a lot of them that can't make it to MMA. Just go boxing, not high level boxing, but just blood and guts, bare knuckle boxing. But that is it for this edition of the Scrap Report. As always, if you're listening, you're watching, wherever you're at, please like, share, subscribe, comment what you thought about this episode, some of the points we talked about. But of course, I am Jason Burgos. He is Anthony Walker. Until next time, everybody, bye-bye.